Hi everyone, it's Ashwin Rao. Today I'm bringing you the boot that started it all. At least for me, this is potentially the boot that started it, but also the boot that is the one boot to end them all. Plus, it may have been the best acquisition of any boot I've ever purchased, and that is a makeup from Flame Panda. So Flame Panda, as you know, is the elusive Chinese bootmaker known as Peng, supported by members of his family, and has been famous for a wide range of styles, but probably most famous for his moc toe style, which we're seeing here. Moc toes were amongst the very first of the styles that I became enamored with when I started transitioning from dress footwear to heritage style footwear. I just love the apron that Flame Panda has executed, and I like the style of the moc toe. I was a big fan of split toe derbies. I actually remain a big fan of split toe derbies. And so the moc toe was a easy transition to heritage wear when I started getting interested in these boots. And Flame Panda potentially has the best of all of the moc toes out there from my standpoint. There's just a balance to this style. There is a symmetry to this style. There's a heft and a weight to this model that seems to just do an incredible job at really capturing the essence of what a moc toe is meant to be. This makeup was done using Horween horse stripe leather, which is a type of leather that actually does share components with shell cordovan. I believe that Horween manufactures horse stripe to not include any of the cordovan parts, the cordovan being a membrane in the horse's rear quarters, and the horse stripe being the leather adjacent to the cordovan, also quite thick. I believe horse butt style leather, if I'm not mistaken. As you can see, Flame Panda has done an incredible job where he's executing a stitch down construction here with this leather folded over and contrast stitching on the upper. This Horween horse stripe leather is effectively a color 8, deep maroon brown color. Here we see 5 eyelets and 3 speed hooks. Very well done. Laces are from a separate company, Mason & Smith, that I have loved and have stood the test of time. This pair is now about 4 years old, and I have to thank Stitch Down, specifically the podcast that at the time was being hosted by both Ben and Tico Blanco about best footwear manufacturers around the world. And at the time, Flame Panda was relatively new, so it took me about 6 months to get this pair. But now the elusive Peng is hard to get a hold of, and it takes upwards of 2 years, if not more, to get his boots. But they're well worth it. They cost a lot of money. They didn't cost as much back in the day, but they were still expensive. But to me, this style is just about as good as anything you will ever come across. And as you can see, it's aged well. I wear it about 5 to 10 times a year, so not a ton. I've cared for it by doing a little bit of protection with pure polish products, hence you see the shine there. But as you can see, it's held up well. I use shoe trees and everything that I wear because I wish to preserve the quality of the shoe. But really, it's a tremendous boot. It's got a block heel, a very rugged 3-piece leather heel stack, a very dense single midsole through the heel and waist, transitioning to a double midsole, and a Dr. Sole Rockcord full sole to adorn the bottom of the shoe. The stitch down construction is just very cleanly done. Everything about the proportionality of the stitching as it opposes the stitching on the moc toe. There seems to be a dimensionality to these shoes that is not to be taken lightly, meaning that the stitch density is almost in intervals, with this being the highest stitch, this being the second highest stitch, this being the lowest stitch, but the way that the stitches are placed in their density fits each other and each design element quite well. We see a nicely rolled top, you see a lined inner, you see the stitch down the back seam, You see a gusseted tongue, and just everything about this boot screams quality. And this, my friends, was the boot that started it all. Before I had all of the other boots, before the Vibergs, before the Pacific Northwest brands, before the other Chinese makers, before pretty much anybody else that I've explored in heritage footwear, the Japanese makers that I have now fallen in love with, such as Zeros, Gabbard, and Creosote. All of those brands were not even brands I was aware of at the time, makers that I was aware of, but I became aware of Flame Panda pretty early in the course of his journey and was able to secure an order. It took about 6 months. Obviously now it takes much longer, but I'm very happy. I've since owned 2 other pairs of Flame Pandas. I decided to sell those because for various reasons, either the fit was not perfect or the leather was slightly uncomfortable. This Horween horse stripe leather is like cordovan light. It actually is very comfortable, but it forms rolls, it maintains its integrity, and as you can see, for having been worn about 40 to 50 times, it actually has maintained its health and luster very, very well. There's very little break. It kind of rolls, but the break points are very elegant. Speaking to how well this leather has been clicked, even at the beginning of Flame Panda's journey, the clicking was great. The lasting was great. There's no areas where you see any defects in lasting. It's almost like this genius bootmaker emerged from China all those years ago and now has really become hard to track down, because when something is so good, the demand becomes so high that the maker may get overwhelmed. I would suspect that Peng probably had some challenges from a mental health and physical well-being standpoint that limited his ability to continue to work at the level he was. But when you are able to secure a boot from Flame Panda, you should really think about it, because at the very least, you're going to feel the heft, the weight, the value, the volume, the integrity of these shoes. But you're also going to understand and appreciate what it is to be in the presence of genius as far as footwear manufacture is considered. Everything is perfect. And I imagine that people who have journeyed into White Cloud and some of the Japanese bespoke footwear manufacturers would feel quite similarly about those boots as I have felt. And I was just excited that the very first choice I made in acquiring a higher quality piece of heritage footwear, hand welted, hand lasted, hand stitched, was Flame Panda, and I made the right choice right off the bat. I imagine that I'll have many boots that come through my possession. That has already been the case, but this one will never leave. I have no desire to ever depart with it, because there's nothing better that I could ever expect or want from a style such as this, an elegant moc toe. And so with that in mind, I figured I would let y'all know that Flame Panda is well worth the journey, and you should try to find your own pair. Hope you're all doing well, and we'll talk to you soon.